Parents of tweens, if you're familiar with far-off drop-offs...
Dad, stop, right here.
Or get DMs about what's for dinner, you may be experiencing tween milestones. For your son or daughter, these can start at age 9. HPV vaccination, a type of cancer prevention against certain HPV-related cancers, can start then too.
For most, HPV clears on its own. But for those who don't clear the virus, it can cause certain cancers later in life.
Embrace this phase. Help protect them in the next.
Ask their doctor today about HPV vaccination. Brought to you by Merck.
This episode is brought to you by Greenlight. Get this. Adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't. From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/Spotify. Greenlight.com/Spotify.
Military murder is an independent project and is not endorsed by the Department of Defense or any military component. The views expressed are those of the host. The content of this podcast is not meant to be legal or medical advice. Warning, this episode contains graphic details of murder and is not suitable for young listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome back, True Crime Army. I am your host, Margot, and this is a true crime podcast where I focus on crimes committed by military members and veterans. But don't worry, you don't have to know anything about the military to listen, I promise. You just have to be a true crime enthusiast, and if that's you, welcome home. All right, so you may all recall that for the last year or so, Griselda Martinez and her family have been fighting for justice for her brother, Specialist Enrique Roman-Martinez, a soldier stationed out of Fort-Bragg, North Carolina. I have already covered Enrique's disappearance and his murder, and how the only part of Enrique that was recovered was his severed head. This case is still unsolved, and today I wanted to remember Enrique and speak to his sister and family attorney so that they could fill us in on the investigation and what they've been experiencing in the last year. If you're new here and have no idea who Enrique is, I'd highly recommend pausing this episode and listening to episode 35 first. During that episode, I cover Enrique's case, and you get to hear the almost 7-minute long uninterrupted 911 call that was made by one of the campers reporting Enrique missing. So with that, let's dig in. Last year, Specialist Enrique Roman-Martinez, he went camping during the long Memorial Day weekend 2020, and he vanished on the first night he was there. He was there with 7 other Fort-Bragg soldiers, 6 men and 1 woman. One of these people reported Enrique missing close to 19 hours after he had last been seen at midnight. Something new that I learned this week is that all 8 soldiers, which include Enrique, they were in the wrong as they were close to 4 hours away from Fort-Bragg, and due to COVID restrictions at the time, they were not allowed to be that far away from post without permission. I first reported on this case back in June of 2020 when I got my hands on the 911 call made by one of Enrique's camping buddies. The call seems innocent enough, right? Hey, we lost our friend and can't find him. Except when you learn that Enrique had been missing for close to 19 hours or so, and the caller claims that the group had been trying to get a hold of a ranger the entire day since they woke up at 8:30 in the morning to report Enrique missing, but they say they couldn't find a ranger. Well, that seems kind of logical, I guess, if you want to believe that. But we learned that the group of 7 had actually been approached by a park ranger hours before the 911 call because they were illegally parked on the beach. The question I've been asking for a year is, why didn't someone in the group report Enrique missing to that ranger? Well, today I'm going to bring you an unfettered conversation with Griselda Martinez and the family attorney Dustin Collier. They will chat with us about Enrique, the investigation, the good, the bad, and the ugly of living through a tragedy like this one. Griselda will tell us how it feels to get the knock and the gut-wrenching feeling of hearing the words, "We regret to inform you." One of the new things I learned during my interview with Griselda is that Enrique was actually being medically discharged from the Army within a few months of his murder. Another thing I learned was that Enrique was actually sleeping in a white Jeep when he allegedly went missing. He wasn't in a tent, as we were initially led to believe. We learned that so many things were left undone and uninvestigated early on, and that months later, investigators tried to backtrack, but sometimes it's just too late. But even with all of the mistakes and missteps by all authorities involved, Griselda and her attorney are hopeful that this case will be solved. I personally am a strong believer that this case is solvable, and one day soon the killer will be exposed. But just as in Vanessa Guillen's case, we must fight for Enrique. The Army and military will not solve this case without pressure. It is easy to just let things lie, but a murderer or murderers are walking among us. Somewhere in North Carolina, there is a murderer, and he or she needs to be caught. Just a disclaimer that the statements and opinions shared during this episode are those of the speaker and are not the position of Mama Margot Productions. Now, I want to welcome Griselda Martinez and the family attorney, Dustin Collier, to the show. Welcome.
This episode is brought to you by Pluto TV. Are you looking for your next case? Pluto TV has all your favorite crime dramas streaming for free, which means suspicion is free, with countless cases to crack. Watch CSI, Criminal Minds, NCIS, Blue Bloods, Tracker, FBI, and SWAT, all for free from all your favorite devices. Feel the free. Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.
Today I am joined by Griselda, Enrique's sister, and Dustin Collier, who is the family attorney. And so before we get started with talking about where we are legally with the case, I wanted Griselda to tell us more about Enrique, because I feel like that part of his story so often gets lost. So Griselda, can you tell me a little bit more about Enrique?
Yeah, of course. So I think that's what I want people to know is just who my brother was and why this whole thing is so difficult. As a person, my brother was very kind, very gentle. He wasn't a fighter. He would never throw fists with anybody at all. So he would never fight. Of course, maybe argue a little bit, but never fight. He had a very strong sense of justice. He had no problem calling people out on things that they were doing, and, wasn't confrontational, but wasn't afraid to call someone out. He's very protective of his friends and family, and very generous. And he just wanted peace. That's all he said. He's like, I just want everyone to get along, and that's all I care about, He always tried really hard to work and pull his own weight. He and my mom had like this inseparable bond. They loved each other. Maybe they didn't always understand. There's a little bit of a language barrier, but they just understood because they loved each other so much that it didn't matter. My mom was always after him. He was always like, does my mom need anything? We shared a bank account. So he was always like, if she needs anything, just get it from my account. That's no problem, And yeah, he just was a very, very kind person. Would always go out of his way to help someone. That's why this is so difficult, to hear like that this happened to my brother. Mm-hmm. It's just, he didn't even have any enemies, he wouldn't make any enemies. Most people that did start off not liking him ended up loving him by the end of whatever it was, So this is just really difficult. Just if you knew him, you would know that he wasn't a fighter. He was always trying to be, on everyone's good side and try to make everyone like him. And if they didn't like him, even after all of that, then he would just be like, okay, well, then we'll just go our separate ways. And that way we don't have any other beef,
Right. You said language barrier. Did he speak Spanish or did he not speak Spanish?
So he did speak Spanish, but he wasn't as fluent. He didn't speak it as much.
Mm-hmm.
So certain words he didn't know how to explain to my mom. So I would come to the rescue and translate for them, especially when they were, he was wanting to go out with his friends. And my mom was like, no, So it was like that. It wasn't a huge language barrier, but it was definitely a lot of words he couldn't express in Spanish as he would in English.
Got it.
He could pretty much communicate with my mom. It wasn't that bad.
Was he the only son?
Yes, he's the only boy. He was the youngest. Everybody, I tell people I'm not upset. Me and my sister are not upset. We don't have these issues about it. He's the favorite, though. He was always the favorite. He was not the accident. So he was the one that my mom just prayed so much and told God, all I want is a son. That's all I want, and
right.
She got him, so he was that was her golden child.
So it's 3 of you, right?
3 of us total. Yes.
Awesome.
My older sister, myself, and my younger brother.
Yeah. So why did he end up joining the Army? Tell me a little bit more about that.
So, it's a little bit difficult because I just had this conversation with my younger cousin who just turned 18, and the same things that my brother had said, he said himself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the hardest thing to hear. So Enrique joined because we weren't really well off at the time. My mom was a single mother working 3 jobs, trying to keep us afloat. It was really difficult when my parents divorced. It was in the middle of the economic crash. My mom lost her job. My dad lost his job. My dad got deported. He was driving around drunk. So the only vehicle we had, he got, impounded, and we didn't have enough money. It was either the rent or it was a car, and we needed a place to stay. So it was very difficult for a really long time. We struggled a lot to get by. So Enrique, was only 10 years old when this happened. So he saw just all the struggles, that we went by just to get by. Mm-hmm. And I did really well in school, and I wasn't able to go to college because we didn't have any funding. I didn't qualify because my mom was illegal at the time. And it was a lot. So my brother didn't want that. And despite the fact that the time that he graduated high school, I was already working, making a decent amount, and we weren't struggling as much. He said that he didn't want to put that burden on me or my mom, and he wanted to help out too, and he wanted to see his options and traveling the world and getting his school funded. And so that's why he decided to go to the Army. He felt that that was the only way that he could help us and
Mm-hmm.
help himself. And not only that, they told him all the benefits that he could later on fix my mom her green card and her citizenship a lot quicker if he was in the Army. They sold this whole, it's a great thing to have a soldier in your family. He wanted my mom and all of us to be proud of him more than anything. And so he went, and you couldn't talk him out of it.
How much time did he have left in the Army?
He only had a few months left before he was coming home, and he was coming home on a medical discharge. He was a paratrooper, so he would jump a lot. The minimum
really?
was the minimum was 4 times a year. He would do like 10, 15
Oh, wow.
a year. Yes, he loved it. He would say, I'm scared, but every time it's very exhilarating. So just jumping so much, he ended up getting a condition called compartment syndrome, which is, I guess, it's like when your muscles don't get enough oxygen. So I guess they cramp up like all the time. Yeah. So he had to have a bunch of surgery. And he had surgery on one leg to see if that'll help. And it ended up not helping. He wasn't able to do a lot of his exercises for a really long time. So at that point, they medically were discharging him.
Mhm.
So he had a few months left. And he didn't get to come home.
Oh, gotcha. See, I never heard that. I never knew that
Yeah.
I kind of understood that he was getting out. I just didn't understand that he was getting medically discharged. So
Yes.
when was his surgery, like a year or a couple months before he?
It was he had 2 surgeries. So he had one the year before, I believe around June. And then he had another one, I believe, sometime a little bit later that year. I think it was more towards the end of the year, if I'm not mistaken. He had 2 because he also had a bone spur as well. And then he had the compartment syndrome surgery. So he had a couple surgeries to try to fix his legs. And it was about a year before everything had happened. He was still recovering from the compartment syndrome one. That one was a little bit more recent.
Mhm.
So he was still recovering, and it was very difficult for him. I asked him, because he was getting medically discharged, if he was going to be able to go hiking or running. That was like part of our plans after he got out of the Army. And he said that he could walk for a little bit, for like maybe an hour, but then he got tired and he would have to sit down. So it wasn't like he was in any shape to really work really hard.
Got it. Okay. So when was the last time that he was able to visit you guys in California, or you guys were able to visit him before he passed?
So the last time he came down was sometime in June. I forget the exact date, but it was late June he came when he got the surgery for his bone spur. And he stayed with us for about a month because he was out for a month.
Oh, wow.
And so he decided to just come home and stay with us. He got permission, and so he stayed home. And my mom took care of him. Of course, that was her baby boy. She was going to take care of him. And that was the last time we saw him. And, I would ask him about his Army career and like if he had friends or anything like that. And he would always say that they're not friends, they're just acquaintances, and I really want to talk about work. And, maybe that was a red flag that I just never noticed, never really thought anything of. Things like that now I regret not pressuring him more.
So he didn't, while he was home, then he wasn't texting with anybody back home. He didn't tell you about a group of friends, nothing?
Nothing, no. And
No.
I would ask him constantly, he would just tell me that they're just coworkers, that they're just people he works with. They're not really friends, So, and I really wanted to know about his life. I was worried about whether he had friends or not, or anything of the sort. And he just never expressed it. He would tell me here and there, oh yeah, I have this friend, but nothing really too bad about it. We just play video games, I hardly see them, especially now with the pandemic. And, I didn't think much of it.
Okay. So did you and your family, or did you or your family know that he was going to go camping last Memorial Day weekend?
No, we had no idea. I actually spoke to him the Wednesday before he went missing, and that same week. And I have been talking to him because I want to know his plans. I told him my plan, and he said that he might have had to stay to do some security or some work for a parade, a Memorial Day parade, and that he didn't want to do it. It kind of sucked, but he kind of hoped he could just stay home and play video games or watch anime, which I was like, okay, yeah, I mean, that kind of does suck, but at least it'll get you out of the house, and that's about it, really, for the conversation went. We started talking about the car that he wanted, because we were already making plans to, after, he got home. So we were already talking about that kind of stuff. I really didn't ask him anything else. He really just told me that, yeah, if I don't have to do this thing for the parade, I just stay home and play video games. I didn't think there would be anything else. He never mentioned a camping trip or anything of that sort. And I have been talking to him at least a few times a week, especially since that COVID had started. I was working, so I was at home, and I figured, what else could I do but bug my little brother, you know? So, so yeah, he never once mentioned anything. So it came to me as a surprise when we got the phone call on Sunday saying that he was missing. And they were asking us if he was home. And I was so shocked because I'm like, no, he should be in his barracks. He said he wasn't going to go anywhere. You know, if he didn't have to do that security. And that's when they told me that he went camping. And I honestly had no idea.
Okay, so he lived in the barracks.
Yes, he lived in the barracks.
So then he went missing, according to the phone call. He went missing that Friday midnight, Saturday. So they called you. They called you and your mom or your family on Sunday. And what exactly did they were like? Is Enrique there, or what was that like?
Pretty much. And you know, I was like, "Excuse me." I was really taken aback. Like I didn't understand what that question even was, and I was a little bit bothered by it too. I'm like, why would he be here? No, he's literally on the other side of the country. Why would he be here? And that's when they told me that he was missing. And I'm like, what do you mean he's missing? He should be somewhere in the base, right? Like, but what do you mean missing? And then that's when they told me that he had gone camping in this island 4 hours from the base. 4 hours. It's not even 1 or 2. It's 4 hours from that base. And his friends couldn't find him. And I told them, well, have you called his phone? What do you mean? He always has his phone. And, you know, that's when they told me he left his glasses, his phone, his wallet. He left everything. And I'm like, that's definitely not my brother. He always has his phone. He always has his wallet. He always has his glasses. That's just, no, like maybe he went barefoot. Maybe he went without a shirt, but he'll definitely always take those 3 things. And it was really difficult. Sorry. Just
Oh, it's okay. I can't imagine.
It's like they're calling me, asking me about my brother. And this whole time I thought he was safe. I thought that, you know, nothing could have happened to him. So they told me all that. I'm like, you know what? I didn't know what the island looked like. I pictured like Hawaii, cliffs, maybe a waterfall. Like I pictured just like lots of trees. I pictured a forest. I pictured this just place where my brother he could have just been missing. Nothing happened to him. He could have just been missing. But that's not what it was at all. You know, and my mom and I, we waited. They told us that the 7 people that had gone with him weren't there yet, weren't at the base yet. So then we asked them, are you guys going to go down with them? Are you guys going to go get them? And they said, no, ma'am, we're just there helping the search party. And we were like, but why wouldn't you guys go? And they just told us, well, it doesn't make sense for us to go, you know. And I'm like, okay, it's Memorial Weekend. I get it. You guys just don't want to go. But you don't have to tell me that doesn't make sense. You just have to tell me you don't want to go. And so...
Who exactly called you? Was it his unit or was it like Army Criminal Investigation?
It was actually his unit commander. I believe it was I got a phone call from his captain, from his colonel, lieutenant, and his first sergeant. And it was a little bit difficult because they were calling my mom, and my mom doesn't know English, and she doesn't answer phone calls that she doesn't recognize. So she had several missed calls, and she had mentioned to me that day that she kept getting weird calls from this phone number. And I'm like, Mom, what are you doing? If they keep calling, answer it.
Right.
So she said, okay. So that's when we answered it, and that's when they explained everything to us. And I believe the person I spoke to might have been the captain, Captain Iyer, or maybe it was Colonel Alton. I don't remember exactly. I'm sure if I go back to my notes, I'll remember. But they were the first one to just call me and tell me. And honestly, I thought that someone would have drove to that island and just seen what was going on. Of course, you know, everyone knows the first 48 hours are the most crucial. And honestly, it wasn't until like Tuesday, I believe, they sent out a search party from the Army for my brother.
Okay.
Very stressful. As far as I know, on Monday was when CID was notified of what had happened, and that's already 3 days.
Right.
And it's very stressful to just know how they just didn't really act on it as quickly as anyone would have.
Correct. Right.
This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Psst, healthcare pros, word's out, and it's too good to keep quiet. Look, LinkedIn is revolutionizing job hunting, making it possible to search by specialty, shift preference, and salary. Endless scrolling is out. Whether it's a mental health therapist or dental hygienist, finding the perfect role is faster and easier than ever. Head to linkedin.com/healthcare and start your search today.
So now you have Dustin, who's helping to represent the family. So you didn't come out until after your brother had been discovered. Is that correct? Or tell me more about that.
No, actually, we tried on Monday. We were waiting for news. We just kept waiting for news. I can't tell you how much I didn't sleep, just waiting for any sort of news. My mom too. We were waiting, and Monday they said they had come back, and they were talking to them, and that they didn't know anything, or to 7 people, I'm sorry, and that they didn't know anything. So my mom and I just got frustrated. We booked the quickest ticket that we could. It was Tuesday, like 11 at night. We didn't get there till Wednesday. So it was incredibly stressful to get there, and still nothing. We went to the island as quickly as we could. Well, first we went to, the Army. They wanted to question us about my brother. And again, just like I told you, my brother was an unproblematic person. He didn't like problems and very kind and gentle. Just, there's never anyone I've known that just didn't like my brother. Like, even if they didn't, he would stay clear of them. So they asked us a bunch of questions, drug use, whether he was violent or had any violent tendencies, anything like that. And of course, everything was no. So then afterwards, my mom and I drove to Cape Lookout, and we couldn't, by the time we got there, there wasn't a ferry to take us. So we waited till the next day, and I believe it was Thursday. We looked at the island, and it was not big trees. It was not waterfalls. It was not cliffs. It was not a forest. It was just flat. Exactly. You can see from one side of the island to the other. You could walk that whole thing maybe in a few hours. It wasn't long. We were like, that's when we knew that something happened to him. We were hoping he wasn't gone, but we were thinking maybe the water took him, something. But we were not thinking that what happened to him. We were not thinking about that he was murdered or killed the way that he was killed. We were still really in shock because that was Thursday when we saw the island. Friday was when CID called us to go back to the base. And I've made that 4-hour drive several times. So to me, just driving it, I just can't believe why anyone would want to go that far from the base. It's a really long ride. It's crazy. And so we went back to the base. And so they were like, we need a DNA sample. So if something comes up and it is your brother, we want to be able to make an identification. And we said, of course, yeah, why not? Like, this is my brother. We would do anything. So we went in and they took swabs of our cheeks, and me and my mom. And it was weird. And I just felt like, okay, they're being kind of weird. And that's when they broke the news to me and my mom that they had found a decapitated head on the island over called Shackleford Banks. And we didn't want to accept it was him. Yeah.
So they had told you right away that they only found his head.
Yeah, they didn't tell us that it was him yet. They told us they still need to identify it.
Mm-hmm.
That at the moment they told us the teeth weren't enough to identify him.
Wow.
So they had to take our DNA. And it was really hard.
Mm-hmm.
You just picture that the teeth aren't enough. So that's what they had told us at first anyways. And I'm sorry. It's just...
No. You don't have to be sorry about anything.
It was the worst. Just, they were pretty much telling us, it looks like him.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't want to accept it. And I told my mom, let's just wait for the results. And a week later, he comes back. We went back home at that point.
Mm-hmm.
If it was him, there's nothing else for us to do there. We might as well be with our other family and friends when they do tell us it is him.
Right.
And so we went home, and a week later, I remember June 5th, a casualty officer and a chaplain came to our home. And it's the worst. They tell you, we regret to inform you, and we thank your family for the sacrifice that your son made.
Wow.
And they tell us it was identified through dental records that I'm so sorry. That the body parts found is confirmed to be Enrique Roman-Martinez.
And your
I
mom.
can't tell you. Yeah, my mom she just fell down crying. Hearing the pain in her cries is the most difficult thing I had ever experienced. She kept saying, no, not my little boy. I couldn't even say anything. I couldn't cry. I was just shocked that this was my brother. All that was left of my brother was just a severed head. That's it. Mm-hmm. That's all he was. This boy who one time told me, you were hurting my feelings. Why are you so mean to me? Delicate, like gentle boy. That's what was left. That's what someone did to him. They didn't care that we wanted to see him one last time. They didn't care who he was or what a good person he was or what kind of family he had. That's it. He was just, that's all he was. And it was very difficult. It was very hard. It was very traumatizing. It was very, when I think back of those times, like I get the same pain in my chest, the same way my stomach drops. It's still all the same, and and I'm trying to move past it, to try to heal from it, and it doesn't go away. But even afterwards, after they came home, after all the crying, after everything, I realized they just told me dental records. They identified him through dental records after they told me that they couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very upset. And that's all they told us, was that they identified his remains as Enrique Roman. I believe the next day or the next couple of days, someone sent me an article that his death was labeled a homicide. And I didn't know that. I found out through an article on, I believe it was Military Times or maybe Army Times. And I was in shock. And I was like, why didn't they tell me it was a homicide? I mean, obviously it's a homicide, but they told me they were going to tell me all that, and they didn't. So I called the CID agent that they had given me a contact to, that he was supposed to be pretty much the one updating us and telling us everything. And I didn't like him from the jump when I met him because he always talked in circles, and I did not like that. And he would never directly answer my questions, or he would look past me and talk to my mom instead of me. And I had the questions, and he would never answer them. And I had asked him several times that I wanted to talk to these 7 people. And he would always say, okay, and this other time, on this other time, you know, and everything I would request, he would say, oh, in a different time, or no, we can't do that anymore because of this, and that. And I'm like, okay, well, you know, I need something. So he would always talk me in circles and wouldn't really give me direct answers. And I was very frustrated. So I'm confrontational. I'm definitely the opposite of my brother. And I told him, I don't like this. I don't appreciate it. You know, it's my family. We're the ones who are grieving. We're the ones going through this. The most he could have done is told us. And so he told me that I'm lucky enough to have gotten as much information as I had gotten. I was lucky enough that he was calling me, and that he'll call, and that people normally get monthly updates. And I was so angry. He said that he'll let me know in a month.
Wow.
If there was anything else.
ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track, and ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
I have a question for you, and I don't know if you can answer it or Dustin can answer it for me. But because your brother was murdered off base, 4 hours off base, wouldn't the civilian detectives be the lead?
Yeah. So this is a question we've had for them the entire time. We've never gotten a real answer as to why it's being handled internally by the Army's Criminal Investigation Division. The homicide actually took place on federal national park land. So it theoretically should be under the jurisdiction of the Department of Justice,
right?
And the FBI.
Right.
The FBI is on the investigative task force that's been created. Looks like they didn't really get involved until August or September. That's when this task force was formed. And so CID had unfettered and complete control of the investigation for about 3 months. And even since the FBI got involved, for reasons that are not at all clear to us, the FBI has deferred to the CID and let the CID lead the investigation. And we have serious concerns about that, not least of which is that it doesn't make any logical sense that they'd be in charge. But one of our specific concerns is that one of the CID members on the task force is also the commanding officer who delayed reporting the disappearance for 48 hours to the CID. So there was a 48-hour window that everybody else who was on that camping trip had, and whoever committed the murder had, to cover their tracks and dispose of the weapon, dispose of the rest of the body. And that window of opportunity was given to them by this commanding officer. That doesn't mean that he consciously was complicit, but it does mean that, in my opinion, it's inappropriate for him to be on the investigative team, because by definition, that means nobody's going to be looking into his potential role and involvement in assisting the perpetrators in covering it up.
Right. And I think my biggest concern is CID being in charge if the victim is military and the perpetrators are military, but that's only assuming, right? Because we can all assume it was one of the 7 or whatever, but it could have been someone else, right? And CID would have no jurisdiction over this other random potential serial killer or something. So for me, that's really concerning.
And I've raised this precise concern with them as well, is who's looking into the possibility that it was somebody outside the group of 8. You keep telling me you don't know who it was.
Right.
And so it seems, premature to determine that this is exclusively in military jurisdiction. And the answer I get back is that they have no indication that it was somebody outside the 8. That's the answer I get anytime I question something they haven't looked into, is we have no indication that that would be the case, which of course is circular reasoning. Of course you have no indication because you're not looking.
Well, and also when I kind of learned about the case and how you have to get on the island, everyone needs to take a ferry, right?
Right.
My question was, does CID have access to the records, the ferry records? You know what I mean? They do?
They do.
Okay. So they've kind of run that part down, maybe.
Yeah. And there are specific things about the investigation that have been shared with me and with Griselda in our briefings that they've asked us not to disclose publicly so as not to tip the suspects off. This is at the same time they're telling us that they don't think they have enough evidence to charge. So at some point, this gets a little long in the tooth, and it seems like it's a tactic for keeping us from disclosing these things publicly, and shining a light on perhaps some deficiencies in the way this was investigated. And so we've been assured that charging decisions, if any are going to be made, are going to be made this month. And I've been trying to set up a call. I've been playing phone tag with the investigative team at CID for the last few weeks, but I'm expecting the next call that I have with them to be them telling me we've completed all our suspect interviews, we've completed all the investigative steps that they've told me they needed to complete, and we're not charging anybody. At which point we're going to be free, Griselda and I, to divulge everything that they've told us thus far about the investigation, including all the many ways in which what they've told us gives us concern that at least early on in that first month or two, when the investigation perhaps could have borne more fruit, there were a series of missteps and omissions that I think if the crime is unsolvable at this point, we have some clear indicators of why that became the case.
Right.
And frankly, we just have lots of concerns about how thoroughly CID looked into the Army's involvement in this case. And it's not like we're the first ones to have those kinds of concerns about a missing or murdered soldier in recent history. So.
Correct. I was going to say, well, you guys have kind of the ammunition from the Fort Hood report, which shined a lot of light on all the errors that occur. And I can totally see happening in your guys' case as well.
Absolutely. Without getting into the particulars that we can't get into for at least a couple more weeks, probably, suffice to say, there are a lot of parallels, and in our opinion, between the way that Vanessa Guillen's case, for example, was mishandled early on and the way this case was handled early on.
One of the things that I had read early on, and I think you just hit it, was you said the FBI got involved August, September. I had read somewhere that they sent out divers in September. I mean, why would it take so long to send out divers? I mean, you found him in May or June, and then you send out divers in September. What was that about? If you can
they started telling us that they were going to send divers in August, I think it was. It was shortly after the FBI joined the task force. I don't think they actually sent them until November, if I recall correctly.
Okay.
I think it was December.
There you go. Yes. I do remember it being a significant delay because we just had these weekly briefings with them and it's coming, and it never actually came. The suspect interviews that they're supposed to be completing right now, this month in May, they've been telling us since August were imminent. So there have been a lot of inexplicable delays. And frankly, it's hard to tell from where we're sitting how much of the delay is the CID and how much is the FBI.
Oh, because it's kind of, you have two parties here.
Well, there's a joint task force that CID is leading. And what I can tell you is that the CID officials who brief me weekly, when these delays occur, we're planning to go out and dive next week, and then it doesn't happen for 3 months. And each week they're telling me it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. Their story is that it's the FBI dragging their feet, that we're pressing them to move forward and so on and so forth. But to be fair, I'm not talking to the FBI. So I don't know if they would concur with that assessment, that it's their fault these things aren't happening in a more timely fashion. What I can tell you is that you don't have to be, a seasoned investigator to know that if you send a dive team out into the ocean 6 months after the homicide, you are less likely to find something than if you had sent them out, say a few days after, when it was first reported.
Right. Because it seems to me from when Enrique was, when it was reported that Enrique was missing, that there was a lot of people on the island looking for him.
Yes.
And then they found part of him. I'm confused as to why the civilians didn't continue down that route. You know what I mean? Like they just stopped.
Well, and I don't recall offhand, Griselda might, who actually located the remains, whether it was the Park Service. They were involved in the investigation early on. Whether it was the Park Rangers. Go ahead.
It was, I believe what had happened, the way they explained it to me was it was a fisherman that was fishing and noticed that there was my brother's head floating from the ocean going onto the banks, the shore. And he called the law enforcement and they were there. So when it got to the banks, they examined it, they took it and all of that.
So obviously at that point, you have indicators that you need to be searching the water. And yet there's no dive team even contemplated for months after that. The other thing is the CID told us all through last summer that they had more than once, on multiple occasions, sent a large group of personnel, I don't know the precise numbers, but a large group of personnel to, scour the island for any evidence or clues. And, we took them at their word. We gave them the benefit of the doubt that they were actually conducting these searches that they said they were conducting. But twice now, we've had reason to suspect that they didn't actually do a very thorough search of the island. The first indicator of that was that when Griselda and Maria first toured the island themselves, they found animal bones that the CID investigators apparently had overlooked. Now it turned out DNA testing determined that those were not human bones.
Right.
But nevertheless, you couldn't tell that by looking at them. They had to test it forensically. So it raises the question, how is it that Griselda and her mother can go out there for an hour or two and find this clearly relevant evidence to test that the CID investigators missed in their comprehensive sweep with a large group of personnel? Then when the FBI was going to do their dive, they also did a drone sweep of the island and discovered, I forget what you call it, but a little embankment, a little miniature island off the shore that had not been searched by the CID. And without getting into the particulars of what was found there, suffice to say they found a very significant piece of potential evidence on that embankment, again, some 6 months after the CID assured us that they had multiple times thoroughly searched the island. And so, we have plenty of reason to doubt that the CID actually did search the island thoroughly, even the island itself, setting aside the delays in sending a dive team.
Right. So I have questions about this investigation kind of early on.
Yeah.
So Enrique had his own tent where he left everything, right? His glasses. Do you have any indication if actual police investigators went in to search his room to see if there was other people's fingerprints or anything like that to see who would have been kind of ruffling with his stuff? Or did his alleged friends take the tent down? Like what's that? Tell me more if you can.
I do know a little bit about the question regarding his room search. I don't know the specific answer to your question about who took his tent down, but certainly we do know that some of his personal effects ended up in police custody. So presumably the park rangers or whoever was first responder gathered those materials. I don't think I can get into the details right now of the room search issue.
The tent search, right? The tent.
Well, as far as the tent search, I just don't know the answer to your question.
Okay.
Of who specifically conducted the search. But as far as his barracks back at the base, there are some issues around that I don't think we can get into the particulars in just yet. But suffice to say, there's some red flags there too.
Oh, I'm not surprised. What about the cars? So I believe is it 1 or 2 cars? Because it was 8 people. Was there any indication that the forest rangers were like, hey, let me search your guy's car? Or
yeah. I don't believe that there was any vehicular search conducted before these individuals returned to base.
Okay.
It's another thing that we're concerned about with that 40-hour delay in reporting to the Criminal Investigation Division. So for the first 48 hours, the commanding officer is treating it as an AWOL situation, which of course is exactly what happened to Vanessa Guillen. So for the first 48 hours, they're treating it as though Enrique is AWOL. So nobody is going to the base to going to the island to escort these individuals back, to search their vehicles, to question them or interrogate them about what occurred. They had 48 hours to pack up leisurely, clean up whatever they needed to clean up, drive back on their own volition, stop anywhere they would like to dispose of evidence on the 2 or 3 hour drive back that they had, return to base, clean their vehicle, whatever they needed to do. They had 48 hours to do it before anybody asked them a single question about Enrique.
Your gut affects everything, even your mood. So Ollie created 2 brand new products to take care of your insides. Ollie Big 10 Probiotic has 10 strains of probiotics, their most ever, to support a healthy gut microbiome, immune system, and stress response. And Ollie Super Good Superfoods delivers 15 superfoods in tasty gummy form. Find them at ollie.com and exclusively at Walmart. Ollie! These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
What's the ultimate story of where your brother slept, the tent situation, the car situation? Tell me about that.
So there was 2 cars. It was a white Jeep and a blue pickup truck. And they both went. So my brother went in the white Jeep in the morning. They were the first ones to arrive on the island. It was 4 in each vehicle. So you could see my brother in the cameras of the ferry, the little store. You could see him. He gets on there with them, and they, go to the island. They arrive at their campsite.
So you saw the video?
No, I didn't get to see the video.
Gotcha.
The park ranger, she explained it to me, so I can kind of envision. And
gotcha.
So they went to the island. They got to their spot. They were driving off with the car, so he was holding onto the car and just there being a bunch of dumb plays. I mean, what can I say, And so they got to the campsite, and then the blue pickup came in later, a couple hours later, I think, and they were just camping. I mean, I don't think they meant for me to see pictures, but I saw pictures of them. My brother's still alive at sunset and everything. So there were those. And I guess later on in the night when I was ready for people to go to bed. Also, I might actually want to mention there was a bunch of storms going on at the same time. But, in North Carolina, it was really hot. It was humid. Actually, the rainwater was hot. And so was the water. It was really weird. So it wasn't cold or anything. So there's a lot of rain. There was a storm. until they got into the cars to wait out the storm. So then my brother ended up sleeping in the car, and
in the white car. How do you know? Was it the white?
Oh, they told me, yeah, in the white Jeep. And he had all.
When you say sleeping, do you mean like it's like midnight and he's sleeping, or 11 o'clock?
Yeah, like going to bed. That's what they told the investigators, anyways, right? So I'm going based on.
That's what the group of kids, not kids. It's a group of soldiers told the investigators.
Correct. So that my brother had stayed in the white Jeep and slept in there with his, and had his belongings in there. So as far as the story goes, that's how it went. One of the tents, I think, fell down, and that's why my brother ended up sleeping in the Jeep. And the other one was up, but someone was sharing with someone, and then another. There was just an empty tent
that was collapsed or something.
Yes.
So then when the 911 caller says that your brother walked off, they're basically stating he left the Jeep without shoes, left his wallet, his phone, and everything else, and walked off.
Pretty much. And my brother can't see without his glasses. He really can't. I just don't believe that at all. Like, of course, that's an obvious lie. My brother cannot see with his glasses. So I for a second don't believe that. There has to be something else. In the autopsy report, you'll read that he has missing patches of hair. You'll read that he had like a bruise on his cheek, on his left cheek. He had cuts, and there was parts where they just couldn't cut his head off, right? But to me,
where it was like some.
Yeah, but to me, that sounds like a fight. Sounds like someone hit him in the face.
So did I'm assuming these 7 people plus Enrique, they're all lower ranking, right? So they reported it to the police. Do we have any indication they actually called their leadership to let them know Enrique disappeared?
Yeah. So first of all, they were not all rank and file. There was a sergeant on the trip. They have refused, CID has refused to disclose the identity of this person, but that person presumably would have been in charge. And that person already was engaged in misconduct for their role by allowing this trip to go forward at all, because all of the troops had been ordered to stay on base because of the pandemic.
What?
So they
that is new. I did not know that. I thought they were allowed to be there.
No, they weren't. They were supposed to stay within a 50-mile radius of the base. And so they were already violating orders to be there in the first place. Okay.
Wow.
Including the sergeant that was
right.
So we do know that that evening, the evening after Enrique's presumed homicide, it's presumed he was killed in the middle of the night. The next evening, they call 911. One of the individuals on the trip, one of the rank and file, calls 911 and reports Enrique missing. And we also just know from the recordings and from our discussions with the park rangers that this person lied to the 911 dispatcher. And apparently just before or just after that phone call to the 911, I think it's just after, they picked up the phone and called their commanding officer back at the base to also report Enrique missing. This is the person that I was alluding to earlier, sat on that information and didn't report. This is a Saturday night on Memorial Day weekend, Saturday night. Doesn't report it to CID until Monday afternoon.
Got it. But calls the family to ask if he's there.
I believe it's a different individual that calls, Griselda.
I believe I got several calls from Captain Iyer and Colonel O'Tan, and then First Sergeant Rivera. They were the ones who had called us. I spoke to the First Sergeant. So the first time I spoke to Colonel O'Tan, and then the last time I spoke to the First Sergeant Rivera.
Okay.
So there is overlap because Colonel O'Tan is the one who received the call on Saturday night from the individuals indicating that Enrique was missing. And I specifically asked Colonel O'Tan in one of these briefings, why did you Why did you not report this to CID until Monday? And, why didn't you question them more about where Enrique was? Why didn't you do anything to intervene at that point, setting up escorts and sort of locking down the crime scene, securing the barracks, all these sorts of things that you would do if you're trying to immediately start to investigate it as a crime. And his response was essentially that he had no reason to question them at that point when they reported Enrique missing. To which I pointed out that actually he did have reason to question them because they were already violating base orders
the COVID.
by being there in the first place. So yeah, you absolutely had reason to be suspicious of what they were doing out there and what they were telling you. And I think the real problem here, at worst, Colonel Otan is somehow complicit. Okay, but I think that's probably unlikely. I think it's more likely that Colonel Otan just doesn't have the appropriate training to handle the situation. And that's a real problem systemically, that when a soldier goes missing, the assumption shouldn't be, they probably wandered off or decided to run away.
They're drunk, they'll show up.
Run away from the military 1 month before they're medically discharged. But actually, let's start from an assumption that they've gone missing like normal people go missing, and we should be looking into how that happened. And the people who last saw him, we should maybe ask some questions instead of just taking their word for it. And so I do think that the report that came out, of Congress out of the DOJ and Congress dealing with Vanessa Guillen stuff, it looks like they're starting to make some of those changes, thankfully. But I do think there's more to be done. And of course, none of that can sort of go back in time and handle this case appropriately. It just can't be done.
Right. Now, do you guys, so my podcast called Military Murder, I get a lot of, I guess you could say anonymous tips. But people just saying, people are silenced. A lot of people in different cases, I'm not talking about Enrique's case, but a lot of people are silenced. They're told, don't talk about this, don't talk about that. Don't comment on Facebook about this. Have you guys heard of anything like that happening in this particular case?
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm not a detective, but I want to know what happened to my brother. Like, I need that.
Right.
And so I've reached out to people that were in his unit. I've reached out to friends, everyone. And they, the commander told me that they have told the unit not to gossip about it and not to talk about it, which I told them I want them to talk about it. I want people to, step forward. I want someone to not be able to hold it in and tell someone and that person report it. That's what I want. Like, as much as they're talking about gossip, that's when people are still alive. My brother's dead. Like, I need to know what happened. So they had told us that they had told their unit they're not allowed to talk about it. And even then, me talking to the people in his unit, his friends, that we met after, his passing and everything. We've asked them, well, what's it like? Like, you guys work with them or, and everybody's like, well, we're not allowed to talk about it. We've been told that we're not allowed to talk about it and it's really strict. We'd get in trouble. I just feel like that's terrible. Like, everyone needs to share it with someone at some point and hopefully it lands on the right ears that they report it or they give them enough of a reward that they'll go and report it, something, but I do know that in my brother's unit, they've been told that they cannot talk about it.
Wow. So what has the last year? So I'm assuming everything's been kind of quick. I know that you and your family have been trying to keep your brother's case in the limelight. I want to say that sounds weird, right? In the limelight, but you want to keep it in the media. You want to keep it out there because you don't want people to forget, right? That's how cases unfold for years at a time. And you guys have done a pretty good job. I mean, you guys are fighting the pandemic. You guys were fighting, even the Vanessa Guillen case that was happening right before your brother's case. And then, that's kind of coming to a resolution kind of now. But then on top of that, then you have right after, I think it was actually right at the same time, you have the George Floyd thing that was happening. And you guys now are a year in and it's a cold case. So what other things are you and your family doing to keep kind of the word out there, or what can you tell my listeners to do to keep the word out there, to keep this case alive so we can find out who did this to your brother and get justice?
Yeah. I know I took a little break because the holidays were extremely difficult for me. My birthday is a little bit after, and that's extremely difficult for me. So I took a break and I didn't do as much, which, I felt guilty about, but I know I needed it at the time. All I could ask your listeners more than anything is share his story, tell a friend or two to share the story. A little goes a long way. There's nothing. It's about to become a cold case. That's the hardest thing. It's like 7 people and it's about to become a cold case. And all I can ask everyone is to share the story, tell a family member, tell a friend to share it, to publicize it, just get the word around. His autopsy report is out there also. And it's terrible what they did to him, everything, and even if you read those autopsy reports, it points to there was an altercation. My brother was beat up before, and even then, even after he was gone, he was still beat up. And all I can ask your listeners is, number one, share the story, have a friend or two share the story. That's all I could do right now. And I guess the number one is I want a congressional investigation, not only because it's just my brother. It's not just my brother. It's been several other deaths at Fort-Bragg, and it's as bad as Fort Hood. And I think it needs to be exposed. They might think they're the number one base because they have the 82nd Airborne and all that, but that's all for nothing if your troops keep dying, especially killing each other. And so that's all I could do is just share the story, ask for a congressional investigation. It's very simple. You just email, call, or send a letter to your congressman or woman. I really want there to be a congressional investigation. There's just way too much going on that base. A lot of stuff that, I'm a little bit afraid to mention, but there is a lot of stuff going on out there, and it definitely needs to be investigated. There's a lot of deaths that are overlooked or marked as suicide, and I can only imagine the pain of those families as well. What I would also like to do is I am changing the status of my GoFundMe to now fund a private investigator. I would really like to get a good one, one that's really devoted and really good. So I know that they're not cheap. So I would like if people could help me out by donating to our GoFundMe cause.
Okay, awesome. And I'll put a link to your GoFundMe on my show notes so that everyone has that information.
Yes, I'll send it to you.
Okay. Is there anything else you want my listeners to know on the way out?
Yeah. If you're active duty, if you're a veteran, if you hear anything, if you're not in the Army or in the military, to just report something, anything. There's an anonymous tip line as well. That's all I could ask for. I know that they asked the unit not to talk about it, but it's been so long. It's been a year, and me and my family are so suffering over the loss of my brother.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Griselda, for chatting with me today. This has been a long time coming, but I definitely wanted to do something here coming up on the anniversary of your brother's disappearance and ultimately his tragic murder at such a young age. And I'm with you. I want to keep fighting, and I feel like whoever did this needs to pay, because I'm not saying it's someone in the military, but if it is, I don't want to serve next to them. You know what I mean? I don't think they should be serving any longer. And if it's not someone in the military, they need to be in jail too, because this is not okay.
It's not, and like I said, my brother, honestly, he did not have a bad bone in his body, at all. He was such a great person. He really wanted to help people. And, a lot of the times when I do these marches and protests, I tell people my brother would have been there for Vanessa Guillen. He would have.
Mm-hmm.
He would have been telling everybody this is, bullshit. Like, no woman has to go through it. He really had a really strong sense of justice. And even then, I mean, there's a story that that I tell people about when he was in the Army, actually a little bit before this happened. I guess their whole unit threw a party, and there was a lot of, there was illegal drinking, like underage drinkers, and pretty much everyone got in trouble for this party. And so my brother was one of the ones that, there was one person in particular that got into the most trouble. And my brother went forward and said, I don't feel right that he's getting in trouble for this. There was a lot of us, and, I'm one of them. And I think that it should be split up. I think that the punishment should be split up. And so he went forward and took some of that punishment. And I just think that just goes to show that, I mean, my brother's an idiot. Who would do that? But he just had such a strong sense of justice, such a strong sense of camaraderie that he just couldn't do that. He couldn't let his friend get in trouble for and bear the whole weight, And so my brother went forward and did that. And if that just doesn't explain the kind of person my brother is, then I don't really know what to tell people. He just was not a bad guy.
Right. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that Dustin was talking about like there should be more information coming soon. Do you think that that you guys are getting closer? Or do you guys think that 3 or 4 weeks from now you'll just be disappointed?
I know I'm going to be disappointed. I know that my mom is going to be disappointed. I know. I already know. Like Dustin said, they waited so long to do everything. To me, it doesn't make sense. At the time, they were telling me it's subpoenas, it's warrants, it's this and that, and I'm not an investigator. The only thing I could do was trust them. They were the ones handling it. And now that I know that my brother's case is getting cold, I know that they didn't do what they could. They told me they did daily, but did they really? I don't think so. I mean, I'm the kind of proactive person. If I want to get it done, I will get it done now, and I will figure out a way to get it done.
Right.
So, no.
Oh. All right. Well, thank you so much. Can you tell me what my listeners can do or who my listeners should contact if they have information about the case?
Well, certainly if anybody has information about the case, you should contact the authorities. And I would suggest contacting CID and the FBI.
Okay.
I wouldn't assume that one or the other is going to relay the information to anyone else. So that's the Army Criminal Investigation Division in North Carolina. I think they're based out of Raleigh, if I recall correctly. And then there's an FBI office, I believe, also in Raleigh that they would contact. We would also love to hear about it too, but we don't want to, impede any law enforcement investigation. Our law firm's number is 415-767-0047. And so we'd welcome any information about that. My extension's extension 1 on there.
Extension, okay.
And if anybody wants to email us with information, if they prefer email, my email address is dcollier, that's DCOLLIER, at collierlawsf.com. That's COLLIERLAWSF as in San Francisco.com.
So tell us a little bit more about kind of what you do as a lawyer, potentially, like if we have listeners who might need a lawyer for something particular, what can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so our firm primarily handles employment and personal injury cases. So wrongful death, car accidents, bicycle accidents. We do a lot of whistleblower retaliation work, as I mentioned earlier in the call. We do employment discrimination work. We've got a strong emphasis on disability discrimination, but we also handle race discrimination and gender discrimination, sexual harassment cases. So the full gamut really of employment-related issues. Unpaid wages, for example, we've got a failure to pay minimum wage case right now. So anything employment or personal injury related falls, right in our wheelhouse. This case, we got involved, frankly, up until this point on a pro bono basis, just to sort of help the family make sense of what's going on and try to get answers. If, depending on how the evidence shakes out, and we should get more access to it as the investigation winds up, these are obviously public agencies doing the investigations. So they're subject to Public Records Act requests,
right?
FOIA requests. So they can legitimately hold back certain things that are sensitive and connected to an ongoing investigation.
Correct.
But once they tell us that the investigation's over and they're not going to charge anybody, that justification for withholding a lot of this material sort of falls apart. And we should be able to get access to more of the information they have not shared with us.
You'd be surprised.
Right. And if it looks to us like, there is a potential for civil liability on the part of any potential perpetrators or on the part of the military for the way they handled this, any of that sort of stuff, those are angles we're going to be exploring as we continue our investigation, because we're not going to close up shop just because they do.
All right, you heard it here first, y'all. The family is still seeking justice. They may have been quiet very recently, but it's not because they have given up hope. They have just been sad and tired, and that is understandable. This is where we step in. The family has switched their GoFundMe page from Justice for Enrique to now asking for donations that will help them raise the funds to hire a private investigator. It's amazingly shocking how many cases nationwide have actually been solved by private investigators, someone who has no skin in the game and someone who is just looking for answers. It's amazing what can happen when you don't have to protect higher ups in their careers. When someone just pushes up their sleeves and starts from ground zero without any perception or beliefs on who done it. I am still shocked to hear from both Griselda and attorney Dustin that they have actually been told by military authorities that the authorities don't believe that any of the 7 camping buddies are involved because none of them had any beef with Enrique. Okay, but prove it. It's like looking into any murder of a spouse and saying it couldn't have been the spouse. They were the perfect couple. Come on. Sadly, that's not how life works. Sometimes it is the best friend. Sometimes it is the neighbor. And sadly, sometimes it's the stellar soldier who commits the crime. Now listen, I'm not saying it was one of the 7. I'm just saying whoever is in charge of this investigation has to have an open mind. And if they need to start back at ground zero to kind of figure out what's going on, then they need to go back and they need to look at their notes and start there. Now, if you'd like to make a donation to the family, you can find the family's GoFundMe link in the show notes. You can also do as Griselda asked and write to your local congressman and ask that an independent investigation be conducted, just as it was done in Fort Hood. And listen, this independent review can encompass so many other things because Fort-Bragg, just like Fort Hood, has had its fair share of murders, suicides, and accidents in the last year. Finally, if you have any information, however insignificant you think your tip is about Enrique's disappearance and subsequent murder, please stop and contact Army CID at 910-396-8777. Or you can contact the military police desk at 910-396-1179. Now listen, if you fear that your tip will go nowhere if you just report to these authorities, please feel free to simultaneously send tips to the family attorney, Dustin Collier, at DCOLLIER at COLLIERLAWSF.com. This show was created by Mama Margot Productions and produced in collaboration with my Bootcamp and Higher fan club members. The music was created by Tyops. Until next time, remember, you never really know what someone is capable of, so remain vigilant always. You have a fabulous week, and I'll keep digging to bring you another military murder story next week.
Shh, Mom's working on our podcast.